Republican side of the aisle to acknowledge the mathematical problem.
I know you're reading your talking points. When I interview, hang on, I'm going to answer your question. When I interview,
I think they had ideas, but they were bad ideas. They were bad ideas for America.
Senator, we're a little off topic. I have to let Senator Obama respond to that
because that just doesn't.
I'll tell you what the facts are.
Rick, again.
You had the word.
I'm speaking.
I'm speaking. The newspaper.
Welcome to UCTV Politics. My name is Jacqueline Devine, and I will be moderating tonight's debate. Our debaters tonight are Will Welenc, representing the Republican side, and Kevin Alvarez, representing the Democratic side. Tonight's debate will cover various social policy issues, ranging from women's rights to immigration policy. As per debate rules, each debater will have a minute to answer the question, followed by a 30-second rebuttal and another rebuttal for another 30 seconds. As per the coin toss, the first question will go to Kevin. In 1973, Roe v. Wade established an implied right to privacy when it comes to a woman's right to have an abortion. Do you believe the father has a right to be notified before the procedure takes place?
I wouldn't say that the father has a definitive right to be notified. What I would say is that as a matter of policy, it makes sense that he would have that notification. But notification is very different in terms of the context of this question than the right of the father to be able to decide whether or not a woman is able to have that abortion. Under Roe versus Wade and established in Griswold before that, it becomes a woman's right under the law to have an abortion because it is a right to privacy with her doctor because it is a medical decision. The fetus is not a living entity, and therefore it does not carry any of the rights that a living person would have. And along with that, the situation in which a pregnancy is terminated is only one that can come down to the decision of the mother and is a decision made between her and her doctor.
Well?
In my opinion, we shouldn't really be talking about whether or not the father should be notified. We should be talking about whether or not abortion should be allowed at all. In my opinion, abortion should be allowed in two different circumstances, that being rape or if the mother's life is in danger. I believe that the 14th Amendment of the United States protects infants and protects fetuses against being killed. Fetuses feel pain during the abortion process, and in fact, a doctor said that during an abortion performed on a 12-week-old fetus, that in fact, in the ultrasound image, you can see a child's mouth open up and scream.
Okay, thank you.
As a matter of, first, I would reject many of those kind of talking points, but instead of just talking about the morality of, say, abortion, let's talk about the pragmatism of making it illegal. If you make abortion illegal, a number of studies, including ones by the World Health Organization, the Guttmacher Institute, have proven that if you make abortions illegal, you will just maintain the same number of abortions and increase the number of women dying from unsafe abortions. What you need to do to reduce the number of abortions is make contraceptives vastly more accessible to people in the United States.
Okay, thank you. Our next question is going to go to Will first. The Supreme Court recently agreed to hear a case involving Texas requirements for abortion clinics in the state to meet the standards for ambulatory surgical centers and the doctors performing abortions at these nearby hospitals. These new requirements have caused the majority of clinics in the region to close, forcing some women to travel over 100 miles for abortions. Do you think this qualifies as an undue burden under the 1992 Planned Parenthood versus Casey decision?
I would argue that it does not. As I'd said before in the last question when I talked about abortion in general, there are two circumstances in which I believe the women should be getting abortion in. And I believe that what Texas has done does not violate anything. There's something else I'd like to talk about today in terms of abortion, and that being a selective abortion, and abortion in terms of killing a child if you know that child's going to be born with a disability. Are disabled people less than human? And at what age is it wrong to kill disabled people, I think, is that question that pretty much brings up. Jerome Lejeune, who was the man who found the Down syndrome chromosome, was completely against the idea of selective abortion and abortion in a general setting. And he said, hate the disease, love the patient, that is the practice of medicine.
Kevin.
I would say, we'll touch on the selective abortion. First, that is illegal under codified law already as of the Partial Birth Abortion Ban Act of 2004. But going back to the original question, is the Texas law and many others like it placing an undue burden on women? And yes, it certainly is. There are components of that law that include things such as a requirement for doctors, for a surgeon to be present for non-surgical procedures of abortions. There are surgical procedures and then there are non-surgical procedures. It places requirements such as a surgeon having to be present for non-surgical procedures, which is directly intended to be preventing women and being a burden on them for them getting abortions.
All right. Will.
Abortion is not a right. Contraceptives are not a right. End of story.
So our next question goes to Kevin. Does the moment of silence insinuate a time of prayer, or does it uphold the Supreme Court's ruling of content neutrality?
I would say that it does not constitute prayer in public school, and it does uphold the Supreme Court's ruling and the nature of that ruling. This has been ruled upon a couple times by the Supreme Court, first in Engel versus Vitale, and then in Abingdon School District versus Schempp. And both times it basically was ruling that you could not observe organized public prayer in school or a construction of prayer made by the school district. A moment of silence does not do that. What a moment of silence does is it's a time for reflection that is separate from religion. And it doesn't have any real specific religious context to it, nor does it have any sort of oppressive quality to it, which was what the First Amendment was hoping to prevent in the Establishment Clause.
Okay, Will.
I'm gonna have to agree with Kevin. What he talks about, and more so upon, like, we're not forcing children to pray. We're allowing those who want to pray, and those who do not want to do not have to. More so, like, no one has to pray. People who want to remain silent, just remain silent, can do so. They have silent time in schools for certain public schools, and a moment of silence is just a moment to remember people and a moment to pay your respects.
Again, I would agree with that. I think under current law, essentially, people can pray in school. You can never be prohibited from praying anywhere. Prayer is in your head. It is to yourself. It is self-reflection. And that cannot be banned by any law. And so that is already existing law, and I think the law as it is as it should be.
Well, we're just getting started here on UCTV's Political Debate Show. Stay tuned for more UCTV Politics. And we're back with UCTV Politics. Our next question will go to Kevin. Should transgender individuals have the right to use the bathroom or locker room of the gender they identify with, or should they be forced to use the facilities of the sex they were born?
I think this is probably one of the easier questions that we'll get tonight, because yes, of course they should be able to use the bathroom of the gender that they identify with. The only reason that you would not have them be able to use the bathroom of the gender that they identify with, which is their gender, would be because people are afraid of them or uncomfortable around them, which is a completely backwards idea that's derived from the 1950s when people were homophobic, transphobic, and a whole range of phobias that have no basis in reality. It's designed to try to cast transgender people as the other, which they are not. They are people who have existed throughout our history, who are now getting the recognition that they deserve, not nearly enough, but getting some of the recognition that they deserve as people and equal members of our society. So should they be allowed to use the bathroom by which of the gender they identify with? Absolutely. Why wouldn't they? Unless we're afraid that transgender people are somehow not people, then we should absolutely allow them to use the bathroom of their own gender.
I agree with Kevin in that transgender people should be able to go into the bathrooms that they identify with. However, I also understand the fears of people, such as what has been going on in Texas, with people being scared about having older men who were just wearing women's clothing coming into bathrooms and being in bathrooms with little girls. But I do believe, as I said, Kevin has said, that this needs to happen, and therefore I believe it needs to be phased in slowly. Though I believe it should be starting in, say, government buildings, starting in public places, and then moving on slowly, moving into private places.
Well, I would say that fear is, I can understand how some people who have backwards ideas would have that fear, but it's not a legitimate fear. A pervert can walk into any bathroom anyway. They're not allowed to walk into a bathroom if they're a pervert. A transgender person is not a pervert. They are a transgender person. They are a person who is that gender and going into that bathroom. It's not like we are going to make it legal for people to go into the bathroom by which they identify with, and then somehow the wave of perverts is going to invade our towns and our bathrooms. That's not what a bathroom is. And there is nothing stopping perverts right now from doing that exact thing.
I gotta cut you off. Okay, our next question is going to go to Will. Is there any validity to presidential candidate Donald Trump's argument that we should build a wall? If yes, why? If not, how do you propose we solve the problem of illegal immigration?
Okay, so let's not talk about Donald Trump. Let's talk about immigration. So, immigration. Our immigration system is a relic. Our immigration system needs to be fixed. Now, how do we do this? First of all, we need to strengthen our borders, and we do that by putting additional investments into monitoring and into personnel. We then need to make sure that the people who come into this country on visas, we know when they get out of here. We need to make sure their entry and exit tracking systems to ensure they get out of this country. And lastly, we need to ensure that E-Verify is put into the workplace. Once that is done, then we can transform our immigration system into a merit-based system. A merit-based system which will bring skilled laborers into this country and which will drive up our economy. Lastly, after that, we have to deal with the 12 million illegal immigrants that are currently in this country. And I believe, and Marco Rubio believes, that criminals need to be deported and that those who have been here long enough to be considered to be able to apply for citizenship can stay here, but those who have not been able to stay here long enough should be deported. Excuse me.
There are certain valid points to that in that, yes, we should strengthen our border security, and yes, we should be more vigilant on our visas and things of that nature. Is a border wall the way that we are going to secure our borders? Absolutely not. 40% of the undocumented immigrants here come over by plane because their visas have simply expired. Net immigration from Mexico has decreased, or has essentially flatlined, but decreased in some levels. Our illegal undocumented immigrants here have actually reduced from 12.2 million to roughly 11 million.
I'm sorry. Will.
So just to sum up, in general, like Kevin had been saying about visas, that's why I talked about how we need to make sure that we have tracking on when people enter with visas and when they're supposed to exit, and make sure they in fact do exit. This not only has to do with illegal immigrants from Mexico coming in, but it has to do with people from other countries coming in and people staying too long, such as Asian immigrants that are coming here for maternity tourism, that are staying in hotels that have their children here, so that their children can in fact be considered American citizens. It is considered to be a thing of higher status in Asia, and we need to make sure this does not happen. In doing so, we will make sure that people with visas leave when they're supposed to.
Okay, so that brings us to the end of the questions. Each candidate will give their closing statements. Will?
What I'd like to talk about today is my comm and gender class that I've taken this semester. And in this class, we have learned a lot of things that I believe are not true. In this class, we have learned that men are rape thirsty, that men do not care about women, treat women simply as objects. We have learned that men are pigs, essentially, but that women can do what they want and not be penalized for it in any way, shape, or form, but men can be. These third-wave feminists that are no longer out for women's rights, but that are out to ensure that men do not have any rights, are crushing what women in the 1920s who fought for their right to vote have done, and are making a mockery of what feminism used to be. That's all I have to say.
Kevin.
I think for my closing statement, I would say that that's a bunch of poppycock. Because what feminism today is a reaction to hundreds of years of the subjugation of women, of racial minorities, of basically anybody who's the different. That is what this whole conversation has been about today. They're social issues. They're issues with our society where we think that anybody who's asking for their rights to be actually recognized are somehow trying to take rights away from us. That immigrants pose a threat to our way of life, even though they are proven to not, because our way of life is still great and tremendous as it is. The people who are really hurting in this day and age are the others, the people that we otherize and suggest that because they're asking for more, for their due rights, for women to not be significantly more likely to be sexually assaulted, for immigrants or transgender women not to be significantly more likely to be murdered. The idea that we're going to be a nation that talks about any time any other group is respected or shown any level of equal respect is somehow taken away from us, it's nonsense. And it's part of the problem with discussing these social issues. What we need to do as a country is be thoughtful and be considerate about how we're going to move forward together, with everyone included and with everybody respected in their rights and in their responsibilities to their society.
Thank you, Kevin. Well, that's it for tonight's debate. Have a great winter break and stay tuned for more UCTV Politics.